There's a manuscript Neville Goddard never wanted you to know about, a document he wrote in his final days and then tried to destroy, but something prevented those pages from turning to ash. Have you ever felt like the universe is testing you? Like every desire you manifest is just preparation for something bigger? Today, you'll discover why Neville tried to erase this knowledge from the face of the earth. And by the end of this revelation, you'll never look at your desires the same way. What I'm about to tell you has been kept secret for nearly 60 years. It was 1972. Neville Goddard was in his final months. He taught the law of assumption to thousands, transformed lives, but there was something he kept to himself, a method that worked too fast, too dangerous. In the cold October nights, he began writing furiously, page after page of knowledge he'd never shared in his lectures. A system of manifestation working in exactly 33 days. 33, the number of complete transformation. But when he finished writing, something inside him shifted. The power of those words on paper. It was too real. You know what happens when a secret becomes too big to keep. It starts leaking on its own, like water finding a crack in a wall. And this manuscript started leaking through dreams. People who'd never met Neville began dreaming fragments of those pages, waking with visions of specific techniques, numbers, sequences, words they couldn't forget. This terrified him. In the first week of November, he tried to burn it all, but when the flames touched the paper, something impossible happened. The words began appearing elsewhere, in notebooks he'd never touched, in books from his personal library, as if the knowledge refused to be destroyed. That's when he understood a terrible truth about manifestation. There's a point where you no longer manifest objects or situations. You manifest entire realities. And the method in that manuscript crossed that line. But let me tell you how I discovered this. 3 years ago, I was researching Neville's personal archives in a private library in New York City, documents supposedly destroyed decades ago. And at the bottom of a dusty box, I found something that shouldn't exist. Loose pages, yellowed with age, with a handwriting I recognized instantly. When I started reading, my life changed completely. In the first lines, Neville wrote about people who'd materialize things that broke the laws of physics. Money appearing out of nowhere, relationships forming against all odds, cures medicine couldn't explain. But these weren't stories, they were instructions. Instructions on how to materialize your desires in exactly 33 days, no matter how impossible they seemed. And here's the part that almost made me put everything back in the box and run. At the end of the manuscript, there was a note Neville had written by hand, a single sentence that changed everything I thought about manifestation. This method works because it doesn't manifest what you want. It manifests who you become. Do you understand the difference? When you try to manifest a new car, you're still the same person who doesn't have the car. When you try to manifest money, you still carry the identity of someone who needs money. But the 33-day method, it first transforms you into the person who already has what you desire. And then, reality has no choice but to reorganize itself. I know this sounds impossible. I thought the same thing until I tested it for the first time. It was December 2021. I was going through one of the worst periods of my life. Relationship over, career stalled, bills piling up. I'd read about the law of attraction for years, tried affirmations, visualizations, gratitude. Nothing really worked. But that manuscript, it was different. Instead of teaching me to ask the universe, it taught me to assume I'd already received. Instead of visualizing the future, it forced me to live the present in a completely new way. In the first 7 days, nothing happened. At least, nothing I could see. But on the 8th day, something strange started. People began treating me differently, as if I were, I don't know, more important, more interesting. as if I radiated something that wasn't there before. On the 15th day, opportunities started appearing out of nowhere. A job that didn't exist the previous week. People recommending me for things I didn't even know I wanted. On the 21st day, I started to understand what Neville meant by manifesting entire realities. It wasn't just that good things were happening. It was like I was living in a completely different version of my life. A version where I'd always been the person I was becoming. And on the 33rd day, well, that's a story that still gives me chills to tell. But before I reveal what happened on that last day, you need to understand why Neville tried to destroy this knowledge. Because there's a price. There always is. When you manifest using traditional methods, you're still you, just with new things in your life. But when you use the 33-day method, you become someone different, literally, and sometimes you can't go back. Neville discovered this through a student named Eleanor. Eleanor had attended his lectures for years without much success. She knew the theory by heart, talked about states of consciousness and assumption like an expert, but in practice, nothing changed until she gained access to some pages of the manuscript. In 33 days, Eleanor transformed her life completely. She went from extreme poverty to real financial abundance, found a relationship that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Her health, which had been fragile for decades, blossomed. But when Neville met her a few months later, he almost didn't recognize her. Not physically. Eleanor looked like the same person, but there was something in her eyes, in the way she spoke, as if she were a completely updated version of who she used to be. And when he asked how she felt about the changes, her answer haunted him. I don't remember what it was like to be the old Eleanor anymore. It's like I've always been this person, as if my previous life was just a bad dream. It was at that moment that Neville understood the true power of the method and its inherent danger, because if you can rewrite your reality so completely, what's to stop you from rewriting who you are? And if you do that, the person you were before simply ceases to exist. That's why he tried to destroy the manuscript, not because the method didn't work, but because it worked too well. But here's something Neville didn't foresee. Knowledge, once unleashed into the world, finds a way to survive and to reach the right people at the right time. And perhaps you are one of those people, because I know why you're here. You've tried everything. Affirmations that don't stick, visualizations that feel fake, vision boards that become mere decorations. You've read all the books, watched all the videos, taken all the courses, and still you feel like you're living someone else's life, as if the real version of you is trapped somewhere, waiting to emerge. I understand that feeling, because I've been exactly where you are right now. You know what else struck me about the manuscript? Neville wrote that there are two ways to manifest: the slow way and the instantaneous way. The slow way is what everyone teaches. You set an intention, you work with it for months or years, and maybe, if you're lucky, something resembling what you wanted eventually appears. But the instantaneous way, that's different. In the instantaneous way, you don't wait for your reality to change. You shift into a reality where what you want already exists. You don't become someone who will have what you desire. You become someone who already has it. And the 33-day period isn't the time it takes to manifest. It's the time it takes for you to completely forget what it was like to live without what you now possess. Think of it this way. You're not creating something new. You're remembering a version of yourself that already exists, somewhere, in some dimension. And the 33 days are the tuning period, like finding the right radio frequency amidst the static. But let me tell you about the most extraordinary case I found in the archives. A man named David, 52 years old, an engineer, a completely skeptical mind. He had lost his company through a series of bad decisions. He owed over $200,000, living on a friend's couch. David didn't believe in any of this. He gained access to the method through a mutual friend who knew about my research and decided to test it, just to prove it was nonsense. In the first few days, he did everything with sarcasm. "Well, now I'm a millionaire," he'd repeat, rolling his eyes. "What an incredible reality this is, where I have everything I want." But something started to shift in the second week. The sarcasm began to feel strange, as if he were mocking something that perhaps was true. And in the third week, a bizarre thing happened. He started remembering things that had never happened, memories of smart decisions he had made, of investments that had paid off, of opportunities he hadn't missed, as if somewhere there existed a version of him who had done everything differently, and these memories felt more real than his current situation. On the 25th day, he received a call that changed everything. A company he didn't even know existed wanted to buy a patent he had registered years ago and completely forgotten. The amount? Exactly $250,000. When I interviewed David 6 months later, he told me something I'll never forget. "You know what's strangest? I don't feel like I manifested this money. I feel like I finally remembered I always had it. As if the years of hardship were just a nightmare I woke up from." That's what the 33-day method really does. It doesn't create a new reality. It reminds you of a reality that has always existed, a reality where you already are who you've always wanted to be. But want to know the scariest part? David told me he tried to go back, tried to remember what it was like to live with financial hardship, tried to access the scarcity mindset he had carried for decades, and he couldn't. It was as if that version of him simply no longer existed, as if he had completely jumped from one timeline to another. That's why Neville was afraid. Because when you use this method, there's no undoing it. You're not changing your life, you're changing lives. And now, you're about to discover exactly how to do it. But before revealing the complete method, I need to ask you 3 questions. Questions that Neville asked himself before sharing any advanced knowledge. First question, are you prepared to become a completely different version of who you are today? A version that may not remember your current problems because they never existed in her reality. Second question, are you willing to accept that everything you believe about how the world works might be completely wrong, and that reality might be far more malleable than you imagine? Third question, if I told you that in 33 days you could be living a life so different it would seem magical, but the price is that you'll completely forget what it was like to live your previous life, would you make that trade? If you answered yes to all 3 questions, then you're ready to know the method Neville tried to destroy. But if any part of you hesitated, maybe it's best to stop here. Because what I'm about to reveal cannot be undone. The knowledge you are about to receive has changed every person who applied it correctly. And by changed, I don't mean improved their lives. I mean they became completely different people. People who live in completely different realities. Ready? Then let's start with the principle that governs the entire method. Neville discovered that there's a fundamental difference between wanting something and being someone who already has that something. When you want, you're admitting you don't have it. When you are, you already possess it. The 33-day method completely eliminates the wanting phase. It takes you straight to the being, and it works through 3 distinct phases. 3 transformations that occur in your consciousness over the 33 days. Phase 1, days 1 to 11, the dissolution. Phase 2, days 12 to 22, the reconstruction. Phase 3, days 23 to 33, the integration. In Phase 1, you'll literally forget who you used to be. Your old mental patterns will begin to dissolve. Your automatic reactions will cease to function. You'll feel strange, like you're stepping out of a character you've played for years. This can be scary. Many people give up at this stage because they feel like they're losing their identity. But what's really happening is that you're shedding the false identity that's been limiting your life. In phase 2, something extraordinary happens. You begin to develop new mental patterns, new automatic habits, new emotional reactions. It's like you're learning to be a different person. And the strangest thing is that this new person feels more familiar than the old one. In phase 3, the transformation is complete. You're no longer trying to be someone different. You simply are. And the reality around you reorganizes itself to match this new version of you. But here's the secret that makes all of this possible. During these 33 days, you'll do something that goes against everything society has taught you. You will live as if your desires are already reality. Not as if in the sense of pretending, but as if in the sense that they really are in a parallel dimension, in an alternative version of your life, in a future that already exists, and gradually you'll tune into that version until it becomes the only version you know. Seems impossible. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah had been obese since childhood. She'd tried every diet, every exercise regimen, every therapy. Nothing worked because, well, she was the fat girl. That's how she saw herself. That's how the world saw her. When she encountered the 33-day method, something clicked. Instead of trying to lose weight, she decided to become someone who had never been obese. Instead of seeing herself as the fat girl trying to lose weight, she started seeing herself as the girl who has always been thin and healthy. In the first few days, this felt ridiculous, like lying to herself. But gradually, something shifted. She started moving differently, choosing different foods, not because she was dieting, but because that kind of food didn't align with who she was. By the second week, people started commenting that she seemed different. Not physically, at least not yet. But there was something in her posture, in her confidence, as if she knew a secret that no one else knew. In the third week, the physical changes began, but not in the way you might imagine. She wasn't losing weight through diet and exercise. The weight was simply leaving, as if her body was remembering a form it had forgotten. On the 33rd day, Sarah had lost 90 pounds. But when I asked her how she felt, her answer shocked me. I don't feel like I've lost weight. I feel like I've always been this way, like the years of obesity were just a bad dream I woke up from. And when she showed old photos to friends, some of them swore they remembered her differently, as if people's own memories had changed. That's what happens when you truly master the 33-day method. You don't just change your life, you change your entire history. But let me be clear about one thing. This isn't a method for people who want to try manifestation. This is a method for people who are ready to completely abandon who they were and become who they've always wanted to be, irreversibly. And if you're ready for that, then it's time to learn the first step of the method Neville tried to destroy, the step that transforms everything. The first secret of the manuscript is in a sentence that Neville wrote and then crossed out 3 times, as if he knew he was revealing something too dangerous. The sentence was, "You cannot manifest what you want. You can only manifest what you already are." Read that again, slowly. The difference between these two things is the difference between trying for years without results and transforming your life in a month. When you want something, you're positioning yourself as someone who doesn't have it. When you want a relationship, you are someone alone. When you want money, you are someone without resources. When you want health, you are someone sick. The universe can't give you what you want because you are being someone who doesn't have it. But the 33-day method completely reverses this. Instead of wanting, you assume. Instead of desiring, you become. Instead of waiting for something to come to you, you move to where it already exists. And here's the first practical technique from the manuscript. Neville called it the funeral of the old identity. In the first 3 days of the method, you will literally bury who you used to be. not symbolically, psychologically. You will write down on a piece of paper everything that defines your current identity, your fears, your limitations, your excuses, your stories about why things don't work for you. And on the third day, you will burn that paper. As it burns, you will repeat, "This person died today and she lived as much as she could with what she knew. Now it's time for someone new to be born." Sounds dramatic? It's because it is. You need to understand that your current identity is not real. It's just a collection of thoughts repeated for so long that you've started to believe they are true. But thoughts can be changed. And when you change your fundamental thoughts about who you are, everything else changes automatically. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was a 41-year-old insurance salesman. He earned enough to survive, but never to thrive. He had convinced himself that he wasn't good with money, that people like him didn't get rich. When Marcus encountered the method, the first thing he had to do was kill that version of himself. On the paper he burned, he wrote, "I am Marcus, the mediocre salesman who will never achieve financial success because I wasn't born for it." And when the flames consumed those words, something inside him was freed. Because you know what happens when you kill a limiting identity. The space it occupied becomes empty, and nature abhors a vacuum. So, over the next 4 days, Marcus began to build a new identity. Not Marcus who wants to be rich, but Marcus who already is prosperous and is just remembering it. Every morning, he woke up and asked himself, how would Marcus, the naturally prosperous man, start this day? He wasn't pretending. He was experimenting, testing what it felt like to live as a different version of himself. And something extraordinary began to happen. His decisions changed. His habits changed. The way he spoke to clients changed, as if he'd accessed entirely new software to operate his life. In the second week, his sales doubled. In the third week, he got promoted. By the end of the 33 days, he was earning more in a month than he used to earn in a year. But the most impressive thing wasn't the results. It was how he reacted to the results. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't elated like someone who'd just gotten lucky. He reacted like someone who was finally living his normal life. "Of course I'm earning well," he told me. "I've always been good with money. It just took me a while to remember that." That's the difference between traditional manifestation and the 33-day method. In traditional manifestation, you celebrate when something good happens because it's rare. In the 33-day method, you accept when something good happens because it's normal. But to get to that point, you need to master the second technique from the Manuscript. Neville called it the absolute present technique. Most people live in what I call the conditional present. They think, "I'll be happy when I get that. I'll feel secure when I have this. I'll love myself when I change that." But the conditional present keeps you trapped in an endless loop of waiting. The absolute present is different. In the absolute present, everything you want already exists now. Not potentially, not on its way, now. And here's how to practice this during days 4 to 15 of the method. Every time you think about your desire, you'll change your mental language. Instead of, "I want to find my ideal partner," you think, "How great it is that I have the perfect relationship of my life." Instead of, "I need more money," you think, "How lucky I am to have complete financial abundance." Instead of, "I wish I were healthier," you think, "How grateful I am for perfect health." But here's the crucial point. You're not trying to convince yourself that this is true. You're practicing living in a reality where this is already true, like an actor rehearsing for a role, except that the role eventually becomes who you are. Eleanor discovered this in a way that completely changed my understanding of the method. Eleanor had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that doctors said was incurable. For 3 years, she'd identified herself as Eleanor the sick person. Her whole life revolved around the illness. When she started the 33-day method, the first thing she had to do was kill Eleanor, the sick person. In the first few days, this seemed impossible. How could she ignore the symptoms? How could she pretend she wasn't sick? But she understood she wasn't pretending not to be sick. She was practicing being someone who had never been sick. Every morning she woke up and asked herself, how would Eleanor, the perfectly healthy person, live this day? In the first few days, the answer was hard to find. She'd forgotten what it was like to live without pain, without limitations, without constant fear about the future. But gradually, she started to remember memories of what it was like to run, of what it was like to eat without worry, of what it was like to make plans for the future without considering the disease. And something incredible happened. The more she remembered what it was like to be healthy, the healthier she became. Not linearly, not as a gradual improvement, but as if she were tuning into a different frequency of reality, a frequency where Eleanor had never been sick. On the 28th day, she had new tests done. The results left the doctors baffled. There were no more signs of the disease, as if it had never existed. When I asked Eleanor how she explained this, she gave me an answer that gave me chills. I didn't cure myself of a disease. I remembered a version of myself who had never been sick. And the more I remembered, the more real that version became, until it became the only version that existed. This brings us to the third technique in the manuscript, the most powerful and the most dangerous. Neville called it the future memory technique. Here's how it works. During days 16 to 25, you'll start creating memories of events that haven't happened yet. Memories of what it was like when your desire manifested. Memories of how you felt. Who was there? All the sensory details. And you'll review these memories every day, as if they were real memories of something that actually happened. Sounds crazy? Let me explain the science behind it. Your brain can't distinguish between a real memory and a vividly imagined memory. To your nervous system, if you can remember something with sensory details, it's because it happened. And when your brain believes something has already happened, it stops resisting. It stops looking for evidence of why it's impossible. Instead, it starts looking for ways to make it happen again. Because after all, if it happened once, it can happen again. This is the technique Robert used to manifest $2 million in 8 months. Robert was a bookkeeper from a small town, 45 years old, divorced, living in a rented apartment, no savings, no investments, no prospects of wealth whatsoever. But Robert had one advantage. He was extremely detail-oriented. And when he applied the future memory technique, he was meticulous. Every day, for 10 days straight, he created and relived the same memory. The memory of being in his new office, an office he owned, in a building he owned, looking at a bank account with $2 million. He memorized every detail. The smell of the new leather chair, the feel of the expensive computer mouse in his hand, the sound of the secretary talking on the phone in the hallway, the texture of the business card with his name and CEO title. Every day, he relived this memory for 20 minutes. And every day, it became more real. Until one day, he realized he wasn't imagining the memory anymore. He was remembering it, as if it was something that had actually happened. And that's when the magic began. Because when you truly believe, at the cellular level, that something has already happened, you stop acting like someone who's trying to make it happen. You start acting like someone who's repeating something familiar. Robert started making decisions like a CEO. He started talking like a wealthy man. He began to see opportunities that were previously invisible. In 2 months, he'd quit his job and opened his own consulting firm. In 4 months, he had 3 major clients. In 6 months, he was considering opening a second office. And in 8 months, he was looking at a bank account with exactly $2 million. The strangest part, when it happened, he wasn't shocked, he wasn't elated. He just thought, here we go again. Decked, as if it were the second time this was happening, because to his brain, it was. But the future memory technique has a dark side, a side that Neville discovered too late. When you create incredibly vivid future memories, you can start confusing what actually happened with what you imagined happened. And sometimes, you can create memories of a life that was never yours. That's what happened to Jennifer. Jennifer used the technique to manifest the relationship of her dreams. She created detailed memories of meeting her future husband, of dating, of getting engaged, of getting married, and it worked. Within 6 months, she met someone who seemed to have stepped directly out of her visualizations. But 6 months after the wedding, Jennifer started having a strange problem. She couldn't remember what it was like before she met him. She couldn't access memories of being single, as if that version of her had never existed. Worse yet, she started having memories of events that couldn't have happened, memories of anniversaries they hadn't had, of trips they hadn't taken, of conversations that couldn't have happened because they were about people she only met later. It was as if she'd replaced her real memories with the memories she'd created. When she told me this, I finally understood why Neville tried to destroy the manuscript. Because the 33-day method doesn't just change your future, it can rewrite your past as well. And if you completely rewrite your past, who you were before simply ceases to exist. But here's something Jennifer discovered, and it changed my perspective on the entire method. She didn't see it as a problem. You know what the difference is between my life before and my life now? She asked me. Before, I was someone who was always trying to become someone better. Now, I'm someone who has always been exactly who she wanted to be. And if I lost some old memories in the process, well, they were memories of a life I didn't want to live anyway. That made me realize something fundamental about the 33-day method. It's not for people who want to improve their lives. It's for people who want completely different lives. And if you're ready for that, then it's time to learn the final technique, the technique that seals the transformation forever. Neville called it the final integration ritual. This technique takes place during the last 8 days of the method, days 26 to 33, and this is where everything consolidates. This is where the new version of you becomes permanent. During these 8 days, you'll do something that may seem simple, but which has incredible transformative power. You'll live as if the past 33 days were just you remembering who you always were. Every old thought that pops up, you'll treat it like a vague dream from a life you once dreamt. Every memory of limitation, you'll treat it like a story someone told you about a person you don't know. Every time someone mentions how you used to be, you'll react with genuine confusion, as if they were talking about a different person, because you'll understand. The previous version of you was just a role you were playing, and now you're playing the role of your real life. This is the technique Thomas used to become completely unrecognizable. Thomas had been shy and insecure his whole life. He worked as a programmer in a cubicle, avoided eye contact, never expressed his opinions, lived as if he were apologizing for existing. When he finished the 33 days, he had become a completely different person, confident, charismatic, a natural leader. People gravitated towards him. His ideas were heard and respected. He radiated an energy that made others feel better just by being around. But when former colleagues mentioned how he used to be shy, Thomas literally didn't know what they were talking about. Shy? I've never been shy. I've always been like this, he replied with complete sincerity. And when they showed old photos or told specific stories, Thomas looked confused, as if they were showing pictures of a stranger who looked like him. At the end of the 33 days, Thomas wasn't pretending to be confident. He genuinely couldn't access any memory of having been shy, as if that version of him had never existed. And here's what strikes me most about cases like Thomas's. The people around him started to remember him differently too. Colleagues who had worked with him for years started telling stories about how he always was a natural leader, how he always had that special confidence. as if reality had reorganized itself to accommodate the new version of him, or perhaps as if the new version had always been the real one, and the shy version had been just a temporary illusion. It's hard to say what the truth is, and after studying hundreds of cases, I've started to suspect that maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the right question is, which version of you do you want to be real? Because the 33-day method gives you the ability to choose. But to use that ability, you need to understand the difference between the two types of reality. Neville wrote about this in the final pages of the manuscript, pages that were almost illegible, as if he were writing in a hurry or in fear. He discovered that there are two layers of reality: the consensus reality, where everyone agrees on how things are, where you were born poor, so you are poor, where you've always been shy, so you are shy, where your genetics determine your health, so you're limited by it, and the reality of possibility, where all versions of you exist simultaneously, where you are rich and poor, where you are shy and confident, where you are sick and healthy. Most people only live in consensus reality. They believe there's only one version of each person, and that this version can't fundamentally change. But the 33-day method teaches you to navigate between realities. It teaches you to choose which version of yourself will become dominant. And once you master this ability, you're never again trapped in a single version of your life. But here's what Neville didn't anticipate when he developed the method. Some people became addicted to transformation. They used the method to become a new person, and then used it again to become another person, and then another, as if they were leaping from life to life, from reality to reality. And eventually, they lost any sense of fixed identity. They lost any memory of who they originally were. This haunted Neville because he realized he'd created something that could literally erase people from existence, not kill them, but cause them to transform into so many different people that the original person simply disappeared, like a painting that's been repainted so many times you can no longer see the original image underneath. That's why he tried to destroy the manuscript, because he realized some people weren't ready for this level of power over reality. But for you, who've come this far, for you who are ready to use this knowledge wisely, I'm going to reveal the exact protocol Neville developed, the protocol that allows you to transform your life without losing your essence. Here are the rules you must follow religiously during the 33 days. Rule 1, choose only one primary desire. Don't try to transform your entire life at once. Choose the most important area and focus completely on it. Rule 2, keep the transformation an absolute secret. Don't tell anyone what you're doing. The method works in silence. When you talk about it, you disperse the energy. Rule 3, if you start to feel like you're losing your identity completely, stop for 3 days. Reconnect with core memories of who you are, and then continue more carefully. Rule 4, document your experience. Write daily about the changes you're noticing. This helps you maintain perspective and prevents you from getting completely lost in the new identity. Rule 5, on the 33rd day, celebrate not just the result, celebrate who you have become, because identity transformation is more valuable than any specific manifestation. And now, you're ready to know the day-by-day protocol. The protocol that will transform you from the inside out. The protocol Neville never wanted to reach you. But before revealing the day-by-day method, I need to tell you about the last note I found in the manuscript. A note Neville made 2 days before trying to destroy everything. It was written in a trembling, almost desperate hand. I tested it on myself today. In 2 hours, I became someone I don't recognize, someone I always wanted to be, but where did the person I used to be go? Does he still exist somewhere? Or did he simply disappear forever? That sent chills down my spine, because it made me realize that Neville himself had become a victim of his own method. And maybe that's the real reason you're here. Maybe you're one of the people Neville became. Maybe you're a version of him who managed to escape into this reality and are now trying to find your way back home. Seems impossible. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever had the feeling that this life isn't really yours? As if you were an actor playing a role you didn't choose? As if somewhere there's a version of you who's living the life you should be living? If you answered yes, then maybe you already know intuitively that there are multiple versions of you. And maybe it's time to choose which one you want to be forever. Take a deep breath. What I'm about to reveal will irrevocably change your life. The 33-day protocol, complete method. Phase 1, dissolution, days 1-11. Day 1, the funeral of identity. Today, you're going to kill who you used to be. Take a piece of paper and write down everything that defines your current identity. Your fears, limitations, excuses, stories of failure, everything that keeps you small. At night, burn the paper while repeating, "This person lived as much as they could. Now it's time for someone new to be born." Day 2, the mental cleansing. For 24 hours, every time you think like the old person, stop immediately. Say out loud, "That's not me. I am insert who you are becoming." It may feel fake at first. That's normal. You're learning a new internal language. Day 3, the first glimpse. Today, you'll have your first experience as the new version of yourself. Choose a simple situation and ask yourself, how would new version react here? And then act exactly as that person would act, without thinking, without questioning, just be. Days 4-7, progressive dissolution. Your old patterns will try to return. This is expected. Your mind is trying to protect you from change. But every time you feel resistance, remember, you're not changing. You're remembering. Each day, spend more time in the new identity, as if it were a muscle you're strengthening. Days 8-11, the sacred confusion. You'll start to feel strange, as if you no longer know who you are. This is perfect. You're in the space between identities, in the creative vacuum where anything is possible. Don't try to solve this confusion. Live in it. Dance with it. It's the gateway to your transformation. Phase 2, reconstruction. Days 12-22. Day 12, the birth of the new identity. Today, you are reborn. For the first time, you will spend the entire day as the new version of yourself. From the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep. How does this person walk? How does she talk? How does she breathe? Don't imitate, become. Days 13-15, building new memories. Now you're going to start the future memory technique. Every day for 20 minutes, you're going to remember events where your desires have already come true. Be specific. Use all your senses: touch, smell, taste, sound. The more vivid the memory, the more real it becomes to your brain. Days 16-18, the first external change. People will start treating you differently. It may be subtle, a more respectful look, a different tone of voice. This happens because you're radiating a completely new energy. Accept these changes as normal, as if you'd always been treated that way. Days 19-22, solidification of the new reality. Your new identity is solidifying. You'll find yourself making decisions the old you never would have made. You're seeing opportunities that were previously invisible. Trust these impulses. They come from the version of you who always knew what to do. Phase 3, integration. Days 23-33, days 23-25, the mirroring reality. The external reality will begin to rearrange itself to match your new identity. This might be scary, changes you didn't expect, impossible coincidences. Don't question it, just observe. You're witnessing the physics of transformation in action. Days 26-30, total consolidation. You're no longer trying to be someone different. You simply are. And any memory of the old person feels distant, like it's from another lifetime. Days 31, 32, preparing for the final leap. You're on the edge, ready to take the final leap into a completely new reality. There might be fears. There might be resistance. This is normal. Remember, you're not losing anything real. You're just letting go of an illusion that kept you small. Day 33, the complete transformation. Today you wake up as a completely different person. Not just in mind, but in reality. Your external life perfectly reflects who you've become, and the most beautiful part, you don't feel like someone who managed to manifest something. You feel like someone who finally remembered who they always were. But here's the secret few discover. Day 33 isn't the end, it's the beginning. Because once you master the art of becoming, you can become anyone, live any life, experience any reality. You become infinite. And here's the final revelation I found on the last page of the manuscript. Neville wrote, "I discovered that I am not a person having spiritual experiences. I am a spiritual being having experiences of different people. And now I can choose which person I want to experience being." He wasn't losing his identity. He was discovering that identity was just a choice he could make at any time. And maybe that's the truth about you too. Maybe you're not your name. Maybe you're something much bigger that's temporarily experiencing being your name. And maybe it's time to experience being someone different, someone you've always wanted to be, someone you always were, but forgot. The 3 master keys to total success. But to ensure your transformation is permanent, you need the 3 keys Neville discovered in the final days of his life. Key 1, the law of absolute secrecy. Never tell anyone what you're doing. The method works on the energy of mystery. When you talk about it, you disperse the power. Act like nothing is happening. Let people discover your transformation through the results. Key 2, the law of anticipated gratitude. Every day thank you for the results as if they've already happened. Not "I will have," but "I have." Thank you for this perfect relationship I have. Thank you for this financial abundance I have. Thank you for this perfect health I have. Key 3, the law of unshakable identity. When someone mentions how you used to be, react with genuine confusion, as if they were talking about a person you don't know. This isn't a lie, it's a recognition of the truth. The person you used to be really was someone different. The most extreme case I've ever witnessed. Let me tell you about Eleanor, the case that convinced me that this method is capable of true miracles. Eleanor was a 62-year-old woman, a widow, retired, living alone in a small apartment, no close family, no money, no prospects. She had accepted that her life was basically over, that she would live the rest of her days just existing. Until she found the 33-day method, Eleanor decided to use the method to become a version of herself that had never existed, a version that had made different choices, that had lived a completely different life. For 33 days, she lived as Eleanor, the woman who had built a business empire and was now enjoying a luxurious retirement. In the first few days, she felt ridiculous, like an old woman pretending to be something she never was. But gradually, something extraordinary started to happen. She began to remember business decisions she had made, investments she had made, people she had met, memories that were impossible but felt completely real. In the second week, she started acting differently. She spoke with authority about business. She demonstrated knowledge about investments she had never studied, as if she were accessing the memory of a version of herself who had actually lived that life. In the third week, the impossible started to happen. She received a call from a lawyer. A company she had forgotten she owned shares in was being sold, shares she had bought decades ago and lost track of. The value? $1.5 million. When I interviewed Eleanor after the transformation, she told me something that still haunts me to this day. I don't feel like I manifested this wealth. I feel like I remembered it, like I've always been rich, but had temporarily forgotten. And you know what's even stranger? Now I remember buying those shares. I remember the conversation with the broker. I remember signing the papers, memories that couldn't have existed before, but now they're more real than anything else in my life. Eleanor hadn't manifested money. She had moved into a reality where she always had money. And the memories of the previous reality had been replaced by memories of the new reality. Is this possible? Or was Eleanor just crazy? I don't know. And after years of studying this method, I've started to suspect that's not the right question. The right question is, which reality do you want to be true? Because the 33-day method gives you the power to choose. The final revelation that changed everything. But here's the discovery that completely changed my understanding of everything. 6 months ago, I was organizing the final papers of the research when I found something that shouldn't exist. A letter, addressed to me. With handwriting I recognized immediately. It was from Neville Goddard, dated yesterday. How was this possible? Neville had died in 1972. The letter read, "If you're reading this, then the method worked. You became the person capable of finding this knowledge, and now you are responsible for it. But there's something you need to understand. This manuscript wasn't written by me. It was written by you, by a future version of you who learned to travel between realities. You planted it in the past, so that the current version of you could find it at the right time, when you were ready to become who you truly are. This isn't a method of manifestation. It's a method of remembrance, a way for you to reconnect with versions of yourself that already exist, that have always existed. And now that you know this, you have a choice. You can use this knowledge to become the best version of yourself and stop there, or you can go deeper. You can learn to travel between all versions of yourself. You can become every person you have the potential to be. The choice is yours. But if you choose to go deeper, meet me at the library where it all began. On the 33rd day of your process, I'll be waiting. NG, or perhaps a future version of you. When I finished reading the letter, my hands were shaking because I recognized the handwriting. It was mine, a version of my handwriting, but more mature, more confident, as if it were from someone who had become who I always wanted to be. And suddenly, everything made sense. The 33-day method isn't about manifestation. It's about remembering all the versions of you that already exist, in all possible realities, and choosing which one you want to be forever. Your invitation to total transformation. And now, you have the same choice. You can use the 33-day method to become the version of yourself you've always wanted to be. You can have the relationship of your dreams, the financial abundance you've always desired, perfect health, your ideal career, the life of your dreams. All of this is possible, and all of this is waiting for you. But there's more. If you're ready, if you really want to discover how deep this rabbit hole goes, you can learn to access all versions of yourself. You can become a reality traveler, an explorer of infinite possibilities. You can discover that you are not just one person. You are an infinite being temporarily experiencing being a person. And when you master this truth, when you truly understand who you are, there is nothing you cannot be, nothing you cannot have, nothing you cannot do, because you are not limited by one identity. You are all identities. You are not limited by one reality. You are all realities. You are not limited by one life. You are all lives. The first step of your journey. But it all starts with a single choice, the choice to begin your 33-day journey, the choice to become who you truly are, the choice to stop living someone else's life and start living yours. Because while you're sitting there, thinking about all this, there's a version of you who has already begun, a version that's already on day 10 of the process, a version that's already seeing the first signs of transformation. And there's a version of you who has already finished the 33 days, who is already living the life of their dreams, who has already become who you always wanted to be. The only difference between these versions is a decision. The decision to begin now, because here's the truth that few understand. You're not choosing to create a new life. You're choosing to remember a life that already exists. You're not trying to become someone different. You're trying to remember who you always were. And that person, that version of you is waiting for you to stop pretending to be small, waiting for you to stop believing in limitations, waiting for you to remember your true power. The power to be anyone, the power to live any life, the power to experience any reality. This is your invitation. This is your moment. This is your portal to a life you didn't even know was possible. The only question that remains is, are you ready to cross over? Because once you begin, once you take that first step, there's no turning back. You will remember who you truly are. And when that happens, nothing will ever be the same again. The 33-day method is waiting for you. Your new life is waiting for you. All versions of you are waiting for you. Start today, start now, start remembering